Good evening. Welcome to this month's webinar, Ancient Cryptography, presented by the North American Cambridge Classics Project and sponsored by Cambridge University Press. We are so delighted to have Nasthalie Roy with us this evening. She is a frequent webinar presenter and a summer workshop presenter, and she's also a member of the NACCP board. A national board certified teacher, Nasthalie has studied classics and curriculum design at Louisiana State University. Nasthalie students reproduce the products and processes of ancient Roman daily life through STEM challenges, experimental archaeology, and hands-on history labs. Her Roman technology students recently finished building their own Roman leather shoes. In 2024, National Geographic and Lindblad Expeditions named her a Grosvenor Teacher Fellow, an experience that took her on an expedition around the British Isles aboard the National Geographic Explorer. Nasthalie teaches Latin, Roman technology, and myth makers at Glasgow Middle School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So we are going to record the webinar this evening, and we will post the link in a few days on the NACCP website at cambridgelatin.org. And if you need a professional development certificate for this evening's webinar, please email us at training@cambridgelatin.org. So, Nasthalie, tell us about ancient cryptography.
Hi, everybody. I apologize ahead of time, but I am getting over a long illness at this point, and I'm coughing a little bit. So I apologize about that, but I have my trusty cough drops. So let's hope that gets me through. So as Martha said earlier, and let me get myself set up here, trying to get my presentation rolling correctly. Okay. If you need to contact me at any time, my email is there. I keep a website, a link tree, and a blog. And what I'll do real quick right now is to go ahead, or maybe Martha can do this for me, is drop a link to my presentation in the chat. You are welcome to use anything that you see in this presentation. It's made to assist you in your classroom if you want to explore this topic with your students, which of course we all know you will by the time you are done with this presentation, because it's really interesting and fascinating. So as Martha said, I teach a class called Roman Technology, and it's in this class that we explore these types of topics, kind of STEM topics that are relevant to the modern world, but somehow amazingly always harken back to the ancient Romans. So I got interested in cryptography years ago when I was teaching Latin AP, still on the old curriculum. Of course, now you probably know they've switched over to the new curriculum. But last curriculum, this was maybe 8 years ago that I was at my previous school, I taught AP Latin, and we were still reading Julius Caesar, whom I actually really enjoyed teaching. And there was this passage at the end of book 5 where he talked about sending a message to Cicero, one of his generals. And the highlighted part here says, he sends this letter having been written in Greek letters, right? Graikis litteris. In order that with the letter having, in case it might be intercepted, right? And it doesn't get found out by the enemies. That's why he sends it in these Greek letters. And then he goes on to talk about here how he attaches it to a spear with this little strip of leather and has the Gallic messenger toss it into the Roman camp. So like all of this just really intrigued me. Like, first of all, he's using an encryption method with Greek letters that, so that he can get around what the Gallic people might have known. And then he's also using some kind of hidden technique. He's tying this to the spear, or is he hiding it in this beer somehow? So this all just really interested me. The weirdest things interest me, I guess. I don't know, but this just really caught my eye. It was a little when I went to my school that I'm at now. I had some students who were really interested in, excuse me, Science Olympiad. And in case you don't know, Science Olympiad is this national organization that hosts these competitions for students at the national level, regional levels, local levels. And our school happens to have a chapter. And the kids uh, they kind of break off into these little groups to study different aspects of the competition. It's kind of like JCL, if you will, but with science and math kind of categories. Well, one of them is cryptography, which of course I never knew until this student walks up to me one day and he says, Ms. Roy, I'm on the cryptography team for Science Olympiad. And I wanted to know a little bit of history or background about the Caesar cipher. What do you know? And I mean, honestly, y'all, I was so embarrassed to say, like, I had never even heard of the Caesar cipher. I didn't, I mean, I knew it had to have something to do with cryptography, obviously, but I had no clue that this existed. And so that made me think, okay, wait, let me go back to that passage in the AP Latin thing. And then I started looking up articles about it. And I'm like, how did I not know about this? And it turns out, I mean, if you look up the information on the Caesar cipher in the Science Olympiad website, it is like the first lesson in cryptography for the cryptography kids in the competition for Science Olympiad. And I have that linked for you right here, but here's like a screenshot of the lesson. So I was like, wait a minute, like this is, so then I started asking my student more about it. His name was Rishabh. And he's like, oh yeah, it's a pretty simple cipher, but it's a basic thing. And he was telling me all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. And I should know more about this. So there was that. And then, okay, this sealed the deal. One day, of course, as I do, I was looking through, I don't know what online, and I ran across this professor, Dr. Martine Diepenbroek, who was giving a lecture on different types of ancient cryptography. So, of course, I signed up to go because it was free. And I was like, oh, this sounds really interesting. Well, she wrote a whole book about ancient cryptography, particularly the Spartan Scutale, which we'll talk more about later. But she went into lots of different methods of cryptography that were used by both the Greeks and the Romans. And it was just like fascinating to me. Like, okay, wait a minute. These are like really good things that I could use in my class, like in my Roman technology class. And then the final nail in the coffin that made me say, okay, I need to look at this more. I was named a Camwis scholar with the Herbert and Janice Benario Scholarship. And whenever I apply for a scholarship that's named after a person, I always try to, research who that person is, how they were significant in the world of classics. And this lady was fascinating. I found out that, of course, she was a Latin teacher later in life, but she started her early young life in her 20s as one of the first female World War II cryptologists. And she is actually interviewed very extensively in the World War II museum. And there are videos of this. You can go and watch them. I've linked you to them here in this slide. Well, of course, the World War II museum is in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is, not that far from where I live. So all these things kind of came together to say to me that, Natalie, you need to be focusing on ancient cryptography. So here we are. So to start out, just a little terminology for you, because you may be like me, like I was maybe a year or two ago, not knowing anything at all about cryptography. So the word itself is made of two Greek roots. You can probably guess. Kryptos means hidden, and graph, of course, comes from the verb that means to write, graphane. And of course, in cryptography, the message is hidden by using special symbols or letters. And the actual content of the message has been scrambled somehow. Okay, so that's the whole idea of cryptography, right? And I've posted a very famous cipher here. It's one of the Zodiac ciphers. He was a oh, my meeting assistant has arrived, so just be aware he may be here to stay or he may be just visiting. Sorry. And this is one of the ciphers that was considered by cryptologists of the time to be very challenging. So you can go down a rabbit hole with that one. I'll just stop there. The thing that I learned from reading Dr. Diepenbrook's work, though, was that a whole other area, and actually a more used area of cryptography, is steganography. So steganography also comes from two Greek words, steganos meaning covered, graph, of course, from graphane, to write. But in steganography, the existence of the actual message is hidden. Okay, so there's no real cipher here. They've just hidden the message physically somehow in an object. And this is a really great example here. You can see this is a wax tablet. Ovid actually talks about hiding messages in wax tablets by, first of all, removing the wax that's in the wax tablet, writing a message on the wood, and then pouring the wax back into the tablet. So that would be an example, a really good example of steganography, where the receiver would have to know that the message was coming to them so that they could actually look for it in the object. So that's the difference between steganography and cryptography, which I didn't know until I started to really look at this. So how do we know about steganography and cryptography from the ancient world? Well, it turns out that in the 4th century BCE, a Greek soldier named Aeneas, I'm just going to say his name that way to distinguish him from the famous Aeneas, but he wrote this work called How to Survive Under Siege. And you can get a copy on Amazon. Your local library has one, probably. But chapter 34 specifically lists numerous methods of cryptography, but mainly steganography, that were used by ancient Greek soldiers mainly. And some methods were learned from other authors, such as Herodotus. So these aren't his original ideas, although one of them is. We'll talk more about that later. But it's kind of like a compendium. He's gathered all of these things together in this one thing. And it's a really short and entertaining chapter. I'm going to go through some of the examples with you because some of them are so bizarre that you're going to say, what? People actually did this? You have to wonder if they really did, because it's pretty crazy. So here are some examples. This is from segment 31. A man sent with news to tell or a message to deliver concerning something else, which is no secret, can, with his knowledge, have a letter inserted into the sole of his sandals and sewn inside there just as he is about to set off. For protection against mud and water, it should be written on a thin sheet of tin so that the water does not obliterate the letters. Okay, so I've just pulled this picture of a Roman shoe or sandal. This is a soldier's kind of marching boot. And I might know a thing or two about leather shoes, having made some myself recently. And I find this is a pretty ridiculous method, because this is what the bottom of a shoe looks like. So I'm not sure where you're going to hide this piece of tin in between layers, because you've got these nails, these hobnails that go through the shoes. So I don't know. This sounds pretty crazy to me. So it says excuse me, y'all. Once the man has reached his destination and is resting for the night, the stitching of his sandals can be undone, the letter removed and read, and a reply written and secretly sewn back in while he's still asleep. And he can then be sent back quite openly with a return message or even something to carry. In this way, neither the messenger himself nor others will be any the wiser. I guess that's the best message, right? The one that even the messenger doesn't know about. So there you go. All right, this is another great example. A written message can also be carried in on thin sheets of lead, rolled up and worn in women's ears instead of earrings. So, of course, I found this lovely picture of a Roman lady, and she's got actually what looks like little, tube-shaped earrings. So who knows? Maybe she was carrying a message that we didn't even know about. Although these are gold, so a little different. All right, this is quite possibly the most bizarre of all of them. And so I'll just read here what it says. When Histiaeus wanted to send the signal to revolt to Aristagoras, but no other safe means of communication, given that the roads were guarded and nobody carrying a letter could easily get through unnoticed, he shaved the head of his most trusted slave, tattooed the message on it, and waited until the hair had grown again. You heard it here, people. Then, as soon as it had, assuming grown back, he sent his tattooed man to Miletus, instructing him simply to tell Aristagoras, once he was there, to shave his head and examine it. And the tattoos told Aristagoras what he had to do. Clearly, y'all, this just like boggles the mind if this was ever actually done. It just sounds so crazy to me. But who knows? Okay, so next we've got this is Aeneas's biggest example that he uses. And hold on, no, I didn't. I'm sorry. Okay. So he talks about using the astragalus, which of course is, you may have seen these at a museum or whatnot. They are sheep ankle bones. The Romans and Greeks both use them as dice. They use them in games like to tell the future, that kind of thing. But they're used in all kinds of contexts. And in this one, he says that little holes could be drilled into them, 24 to be exact, to match the letters of the Greek alphabet. And then, supposedly, you would string a thread through each letter hole in the order of the words of the secret message. This sounds so crazy to me. Now, to be fair, he does call this the most troublesome of all of the methods that he lists. And you can see here some of how this might work if you were really trying to do this on a bone. You would have to drill those 24 holes, and then you would have to have a needle that was small enough to get through these with a piece of thread. You would also have, the person who was receiving this message would also have to know exactly which hole represented each letter, right? So again, pretty crazy, but who knows? Okay, so I thought you might like to have some activities for your class. So instead of using actual little bones here, we are going to use something else, which is a disc. One of the things that Aeneas recommends is that instead of using those little bones, which are, of course, very difficult, would have been very difficult to drill, would have been very difficult to use, was to use a disc like you see here. So if you would like to try making this with me, you can. I'm going to unshare my screen at this point so that you can see me. And I think, Martha, I think you can probably spotlight me for our video. You might need to do that so that I pop up rather than someone else on the screen. There we go. So I just have a piece of cardboard here. And what I'm going to do is I have a little bowl. I'm going to put that bowl on my cardboard. And I have just a pen here. I'm going to make me a circle like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut that circle out. And, I tried to think about activities that would be cheap and easy for you and your students to do. I know that mine love anything where they get to make something that they can actually use. This cardboard's rather thin. Now, because your students might not know Greek letters, totally fine. We're just going to use the regular alphabet. And all we need to do here is make 26 of these. So I'm also going to leave a little space between the edge here and the little dot so that we can write our letters there. You'll see why that's important in a moment. And I'm just going to go around. I like to kind of do it this way so that I end up kind of evenly spaced. That's 6, 7. Oh, if I had said that in class, you know what would happen. That's going to give me 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And now I can go around again. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 2, 23, 24, 25, 26. They don't have to be evenly spaced. And then next, I'm going to take like a little, some kind of scribe or tool, and I'm just going to poke holes through the cardboard so that I can get a little needle through there. Now, in the original Aeneas text, he says that you should poke some extra holes to confuse someone who might find it. So we can just poke some extra holes here in the center. And I'm just going to keep going around and around, poking my little holes. And this cardboard is rather thin. As you can see, it's not like really thick, like, I don't know, Amazon box cardboard or something. So it's really easy to get through. And then I'm going to go to I have to do it this way. And I'm just going to poke holes through there. And I hope y'all can see that. And if I were doing this with my students, I would probably just use a pin because it actually works just as well if you've got thin enough cardboard. And have y'all seen, like, I don't know if y'all seen on, of course, I love cardboard, so you might not be getting the same feed on your TikTok, but on TikTok, I see these machine that they have created that cuts cardboard really, really quickly. It's an electric cardboard cutter, and it looks like a little one of these things you hold it like this and you just and it's amazing. That would be great for this kind of thing. All right, so once we've got our holes, we're going to now label these A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and we're going to go all the way around the alphabet. M, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. So then I have pulled a couple of little needles. These are just plastic needles that we use for our weaving projects. I think I'm going to go with the skinnier one, the smaller one. And I've got some yarn. And I'm just going to put my yarn through here. Depending on, how long your message is, I guess will depend on how long your yarn is going to be. So I've attached it to my needle. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut off a little. I'm not going to make a very long message. I'm just going to do a short one. So I'll just cut it right about here. And then I'm going to tie a knot in the end so that when I start my message, it will get stuck in my disk. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and spell out a word and see if y'all can see what I'm going to spell here. I'm going to start with, you'll see that letter? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start with a C. And then I'm going to go to A. And then I'm going to go to E next. Can y'all see where I'm going with this? Back to C. I. L. I again. U. And then I'm going to finish up with S. So does anybody know what message I was trying to relay to y'all?
I think we did.
I hope so.
So
So that's
Natalie, doesn't matter whether it's not the string, it's the in and out of the holes that matters.
correct.
Okay, sorry, I didn't
So
mean to cut you off.
someone who, let's, pretend that I've sent this message to Martha. Martha's now got to unspool this. And keep in mind, we're going backwards, right? Yeah. So was this real? I don't know, right? I mean, what I've learned in the little bit of time that I've studied cryptography is that a good cipher is one that you can do easily, but then the fact that it's easy, does that make it easy for other people to decrypt it, right? So I don't know, but this is a fun little cheap activity that your students would love. And you can do messages in Latin, right? I mean, it's kind of
Or,
cool.
or are they counting on the fact that you're sending it to someone and anyone picking up it along the way
Yeah,
wouldn't know the way you all thought? Maybe that's the
exactly.
makes it easy.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to reshare my screen, y'all, and we'll go back to my presentation for our next activity. So, okay. So this next one is the Caesar cipher, which I'll talk about for a little bit before we create. It was written about by numerous ancient authors listed for you there. And here's the Suetonius quote on it. There are letters from Caesar to Quintus Cicero and others to his friends concerning his domestic affairs, in which, if there was an occasion for secrecy, he wrote in ciphers. And that is, he used the alphabet in such a manner that not a single word could be made out. The way to decipher those epistles was to substitute the fourth for the first letter, as D for A, and so forth for the other letters, respectively. So very basically, the Caesar cipher worked this way. He supposedly always used a shift. It's called a shift of 3 to shift the alphabet 3 down or 3 forward. And supposedly, his generals and his family knew this. So it's possible that they were so used to the way that he wrote his letters in these ciphers that they didn't even have to almost decipher things. They knew what he was trying to say. But would his enemies know this if they didn't know that he did this? So we're not sure exactly, how he used this, but we know that he did use it. So we're going to make a Caesar cipher wheel today and try to decipher some things. So to do this, you're going to need this printout. And the link is there for you. If you're following along here, just go ahead and click on Caesar Cipher Wheel, and you can easily make one of these along with me. Okay. And you're going to need very basic supplies. AP, if you're doing with this with your students, you're going to need this for each student. You're going to need some scissors for them to each cut it out. You're going to need some little metal brads, these little things that open up like this.
Time out. They can't click on the link. Did you give everybody the PowerPoint?
I thought Martha had shared it in the comments.
No.
No? Do you want me to?
Do we have a copy of the
I sent it to Martha, but I can share it real quick.
okay.
Okay, I'll do that right now. Hold on. Yes, Jennifer, I'll do that right now. Let me just escape this for just a second. Sorry, y'all. Okay, so Jennifer, you should have access now. Okay. I hope that helps. Okay. So, and then once you've got all that, you've got everything you need. Now, you will need to prepare a couple of messages ahead of time so that, you can write the message on the board and the students will use their decoder, their cipher, to figure it out. Okay. So once again, I'm going to unshare my screen and we'll make this together. So here is our Caesar cipher wheel. Notice there are two wheels, okay? And let me just show you this. This one here is going to be your plain text, okay? So this is the message that you are trying to get to your friend or whatever. The bigger wheel is going to be what we call the ciphertext. So this is the one that you're going to use to send so that it's a secret message. Okay, so we're just going to easily just cut that out. Super simple. I did this activity last year with some of my Latin students. We had like kind of a free day at the end of the year, and they wanted to do something fun. And I said, okay, let's do some cryptography. And I was honestly quite surprised that, you think students know more than you do about certain things. They knew nothing about this, and they thought it was really cool. They had never actually heard of, ciphertext or anything like that. Okay, so there's our first wheel. And by the way, Caesar didn't invent this wheel. A Renaissance cryptologist named Alberti was the one who created this little wheel that makes it a lot easier to encrypt messages using a shift. So thanks to Alberti tonight for doing this. He actually used this to strengthen the Caesar cipher and make it more powerful. Okay, so you have these two. And there's one more thing, really important thing that you need to cut out, and it's this thing here. This is going to be your shift cut. So I'm going to cut that out real quick. And I like to just bend it a little bit because the students are always like, how am I supposed to cut that out? It's in the middle. You just bend the paper, make your cut, and then you can kind of just cut it out. Okay. So you end up with this, and that is going to go on top of this so that when you turn this in just a second, you'll get these numbers here. That's going to be called your shift, and we'll talk about that in a second. So let me go ahead and add my brad. So I take my little brad and close it and make sure that I put it right through the center. There's a little hole right there, a little black mark that tells you where to put it. And you might need to poke a little hole here with a pin first. And once you've done that, you can slip your brad through there and then flatten it out on the other side. Okay. And now we have a Caesar cipher wheel. Okay. So this number is very important if you're trying to give some information to the person that's receiving the cipher, right? We can shift. This is the Caesar shift here. He was a shift of 3. Okay. So he would always use that 3 shift, meaning that when he was trying to encode an A, he used a D. And when he was trying to encode a W, for instance, he would use a Z and so forth. Okay. But you can change that number every time that you encode something. So just for some practice, I've got us a couple of messages prepared. And if you went ahead and made this, you can try to figure out what they are. And if you can't, don't worry, I'll help you. All right, so I'm going to go back to my presentation now. And as I said earlier, a couple of things that you'll want to be able to explain to your students and understand yourself are these words. Encrypt means to scramble a message. Plain text is the message that you're trying to actually send. The ciphertext is the scrambled message, okay? And the shift is the number of times you've shifted the substitution of the letters. Okay, so here are a couple of things that you can try to figure out. Oops. So the shift is 24 on this first message. So that means you're going to shift to a 24. And here is your 24. All right, there. Okay. And so now every U that you see is going to be right here. So that's our U. So that U, the U of the encrypted message, is it a 24? I think it's 24. And that's going to be a W. Okay. And then a G. And then you go from there. I'm trying to remember what I actually wrote for y'all. And I don't think it's right. I don't think I encoded it correctly. No, I think I did. Has anybody figured it out? Again, you really need this. If you don't have it, it won't work. I'm putting the answer in the chat. If you're ready to look, you can. These are the kinds of things I do to my students to make them laugh and just kind of give them a little jolt. Both of these messages are in Latin, by the way. Although you don't have to do that. I wanted my students to be challenged here. So in case you haven't figured it out, the message is sex septum. Yes. I find that students are more motivated to figure out a message if they know that it's something that will make them laugh, or it's something that, you know, is something that they really want to know. So that's how the Caesar cipher works. And I'm just going to leave that there. It's really fun. It's cheap. It's almost free, right? I think I bought a thing of the Brads for next to nothing, $1 maybe. And all they need is that. Okay. And some scissors to cut it out. So it's really a good activity and it's cheap. You got the second one, Carrie? Yay. All right, great. Okay. So I'm going to go on then in my next activity that I think you might enjoy. Oh, this is interesting too. So a good thing to like do if if a kid needs to be challenged is don't share the shift with them, right? Let them try to figure out what they think the shift is. So give them an encoded message like the one in number 2 and tell them that they have to try to figure it out. And what they might learn about is letter frequency, which is really interesting in cryptography. It's like something that cryptologists really get into, because if you can figure out what particular symbol represents a certain letter, right? Especially if that letter is one that's frequently used, like in English, E is the most frequently used. If you can figure out letter combinations that are frequently used, like double L is a famous one, then you can crack the code. And like, for example, if any of you have ever seen the movie Enigma, they're having trouble getting the Enigma machine to work, right? But they finally figure out a way to input some information that they know, which is one of the German cryptologists would always start his message with the name of his girlfriend. And once they figured that out and they figured out what her name was, they could put that they could use that as a most frequently used letter, and that helped them to crack the code. So we have to be careful with those things when we encrypt things. It's really fascinating stuff. Okay, so this is the last one that we'll do tonight, and it is the most mysterious. And I will say, if you are interested in this stuff, I highly recommend Martine Diepenbrook's book, okay, about the Spartan Scutala. It is a controversial cipher because we're not sure that it was actually a cipher. And I don't want to get into this, it would take too long, but there's actually textual confusion about, was this really used as a cipher? Because the word scutala can also mean like a staff that was used by Spartan generals or ephors. So there's a lot of confusion surrounding the word itself. In addition, this cipher is not mentioned by the famous Aeneas at all. So would he, the guy who knew all about ciphers and was trying to compile this list of all the ciphers, not mention this type of cipher? We don't know. Okay, so it's fascinating, and we're gonna see how it works. And again, this is something your kids can do that's super easy and cheap, okay? Because all they're going to need are some pencils, okay? They can use pencils of any kind. I have some lovely Cambridge Latin pencils here. This one is Caecilius Estinorto. Here we go. They're going to need a long strip of paper, skinny, kind of. I just cut this off of the edge of a 8.5 by 11 strip of paper. They'll need, excuse me, y'all, a pen or pencil to write a message. And they'll also need some tape, okay? So here's how this works. And the first time I use this with students, I don't tell them what it is. I give them a message that has been encoded. And I tell them, this is a secret message. And you need to figure out what it says, and you can use this pencil to help you. And that's all I say to them, okay? Because I don't want to give them too much information. They will, of course, normally think, okay, I'm going to use this to write out the message or try to figure it out. But what they don't get is that they're actually going to physically use it to wrap the message around, and that's going to get the answer to the code. So I'll show you how it works. All right, so again, I'm going to unshare here. All right, so all you need is just a pencil, and what you want to do is wrap this piece of paper around the pencil. And it doesn't matter if the pieces of paper touch. They can if you want to. It doesn't really matter. It's more complicated if they do touch, because then some of your writing will overlap. I'm going to go ahead and tape that first part of the paper down to my pencil. Now, again, this is me encrypting the message. So you would do this first before giving this to your students. And as you can see, I'm just wrapping this around until I have no more paper left. And then I'm just going to tape that to the end of the pencil. And this is what I end up with, something like this. Next, I'm going to go ahead and write my message on this piece of paper. I like to write or try to write 2 letters per piece of paper. So I'm writing in Horto here. In Horto, Yaket, Kerberos, kind of went backwards with that, but whatever. Okay, now I've run out of space to write, as you can see. So then I can just go to this next part of the paper here, Kerberos. And then I'll talk about Matilla here. Matilla Conim Salutat. Now I could keep going if I wanted to and go all the way around to this, and that's going to make it actually more difficult to decipher. All right, so once I've created my message, which I think you can see here, I'm going to untape this from the pencil, or that's the concept anyway, of how this cipher works. Oh, that tape got too caught up there. I'm just going to tear that off. This tape is being difficult. All right, and then I'll remove the whole thing from the pencil. And after I straighten it out, you will see that I have this weird looking thing that is going to be very difficult, if you don't know, to decode. Okay. So this is what you want to give to the students and say, okay, this is a secret message, and here's your pencil. You need to figure it out. Okay. Now the whole concept behind this was that the person who received the message, or all the F4s or all the generals, had the same exact sized stick or staff that they would use once they received the message. And they would wrap it around the same, size staff, and that would help them to decode it. Again, we're not sure they actually did this. It's a very, we just don't know a lot about it. So that's how that works. And it's a lot of fun for students to figure out. I have had students figure it out, but after a long, gosh, Mr. White, and these are kids with cryptography experience. This is one they don't often know a lot about. So I think it's kind of cool. Okay, so I'm going to reshare with you. Okay, so that's that. Now, that's one way that you can do this, right? Is to tell them just to decode it. And then once they figure it out, another fun thing that you can do is to have them use different pens and pencils, or they could use something that's a little fatter. They could use, a tube, a toilet paper tube, any type of stick they find. And each cryptography group would have the same size tubes, and they would have to encode messages and see which tube worked with which message. So that's the idea there. It's pretty interesting and bizarre, really. Okay, so some other fun challenges before I finish up here. You could ask students to hide a message on someone's person that another team has to find. Of course, there would have to be some parameters here, right? There would be, of course, no underneath clothing, that kind of thing. But I think this would be a pretty cool one to do. Ask students to develop their own cipher would be another really fun one. And then there's the description of a water clock signaling machine in INAEUS, and there's a picture of it here. Each group has to have the same size container, and then they have to have this stick that has these measurements on it. And these measurements represent letters. Okay, you'll have to go read the description yourself. But it seems like a really fun thing to try that we could, do and see, like, did this really work? There's also some stuff with fire signals that you could use flashlights for. I think that would be a really fun activity as well. Some resources for you. If you're interested in cryptography at all, I highly recommend starting with a very simple Martin Gardner's Code, Ciphers, and Secret Writing. Such a fun little book. It'll take you maybe an hour to read, and it explains some very basic and really cool ciphers that have been used since ancient times. And then just some really good articles by Deep and Broke, again, on cybersecurity in the ancient world, the Spartan Scutali, just lots of fun stuff. So there you have it. There's me, and please feel free to ask any kind of questions that you can think of, or suggestions. I don't know, maybe you know some other ones that would be fun too. At any rate, I thank y'all for coming tonight, and I hope you enjoy some future cryptography or steganography with your students.
Very fascinating, Natalie. You always do such a great job with all these projects that you do with your kids and showing us this evening. I don't know, is there anybody in our audience who does anything like this with your students?
And y'all, I am by no means an expert on cryptography. Great. I'm so glad, Caitlin. But it's just so fun. How could you not? I mean, it started in the ancient classical world, right? And I know that y'all know, you hear this all the time, how important coding is, and coding this and coding that. It's all about cryptography. And so I figure I could just get on that bandwagon and have a good time with my students too.
What I appreciate is the fact that you take the time to show us how to make them in the moment. And it's not giving me good directions that I've got to go off and now figure out.
Yeah, so I'm glad you. Oh, Carrie, that's wonderful. You reach out if you need further activities.
Oh, yes, definitely. You're the person to talk to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing these examples with us so that we could actually do it in the moment. And we hope that our audience will embrace this and try it with their own students. We thank you for joining us this evening. Again, if you have if you have a need for a professional development certificate, if you'll just email training@cambridgelatin.org, we will send you a certificate. very quickly. And we will also post this on our NACCP website, oh, probably the first of the week. And thank you very much, Natalie. That was terrific.
Thank you.
Uh, Good night, everybody. Have a good evening.
Have a
You
happy holiday.
you too.